right, we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to the December meeting of the Portsmouth Conservation Commission. First on the agenda, we do not have minutes from November. Those will be available in January, so we'll vote on those in January. Our next item on the agenda was supposed to be a work session for 224 Kate Street, but there has been a request to postpone, so we need a motion to move that to the January meeting.
I motion to postpone the Kate Street work session to the January Conservation Commission meeting.
I will second that motion.
Okay. All in favor? Great. In lieu of that, we do, so for those of you who went to the site walk for Kate Street, you noticed some work had already been done. Yeah. Quite a bit of work had already been done, not construction-wise, but just clearing the site, cutting the trees, grading, removing vegetation, which we didn't know about until we went out there. And so Trevor is here to kind of talk about that violation, our city attorney, and kind of what we're going to do, or next steps and options.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Conservation Commission. Trevor McCourt, I'm the Deputy City Attorney. I understand from just speaking with the Director of Planning and Sustainability that the applicant has, I think, confirmed that they're not going to be here tonight. And as you all know, it does appear that there was substantial work conducted within the 25-foot and 50-foot buffers at least, including felling of trees, cutting of vegetation, and some earthworks at least done without any kind of permission. The property owner has been sent a notice of violation for those violations, and I understand that they are working towards bringing back a remediation plan to the commission. And what our conversations kind of at a staff level have been is that application would be an advance of, or at a minimum coupled with any other application. So they would have to provide how they're going to remediate those violations, at least contemporaneously with their actual application, if not beforehand. So I just wanted to come here and let you all know that this is something that we are taking with the utmost seriousness, and trying to do our best to make sure that the next steps are in accordance with our regulations and the Commission's expectations.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is wetland conditional use permit application for 39 Dearborn Street. Is anyone here to speak to that application?
Good evening, Chair and Commission members. I have some hard copy plans for all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. You have one? Okay.
All right. My name is Luke Taylor. I'm here from TF Moran, representing the property owners Sean and Michio Bardong for their wetlands conditional use permit application, 39 Dearborn Street. So I was actually a part of the October Conservation Commission meeting that then got postponed, and then we missed the deadline for the November meeting. So we're here on that postponement to address some of the Commission's concerns and provide our updated plans for the project. So I'll go over the approval criteria listed in the zoning ordinance to kind of reiterate the project as a whole and how it meets the regulations of the ordinance. So the first one, the land being reasonably suited to the use, activity, or alteration. And as the site exists, it is a previously developed residential lot, so it is suitable for the proposing improvements, which include a 2-story home addition and some stormwater management implementation, as well as a sewer connection. The second one, no alternative location outside of the wetland buffer that is feasible and reasonable for the proposed use, activity, or alteration. So this lot's unique in that it exists almost entirely within the 100-foot tidal buffer zone. So there's no way that this addition could take place outside of that area, just due to how the lot exists. That being said, where the proposed addition is located on the lot is the furthest distance from the resource. It is in the upper right corner of the lot, as far away from the tidal resource that we could propose it. No adverse impacts on the wetlands functional values or the site and surrounding properties. So no direct impacts are proposed to the wetland resource, as well as I mentioned before, sound stormwater management techniques being implemented to ensure that there's no increase in stormwater discharge from the property. And the surrounding properties will not be adversely affected by this project. You can also see on the boundary plan provided by the land surveyor, there was also a view easement created on the right side of the property to ensure that nobody's views were blocked and that all the abutting properties could use their properties to the fullest extent. The alteration of the natural vegetative state or managed woodland will only occur to the extent necessary to achieve construction goals. We're not proposing any alteration to the natural vegetative state. There won't be any tree cutting. And we also, from the last meeting, plan to increase the width of the natural vegetated buffer adjacent to the resource. So the property owner has been amenable to providing a no-mow zone in the 25-foot setback to ensure that native vegetation can grow back and provide some sort of buffer from both stormwater and on the lot. And then this proposal is the alternative with the least adverse impacts to areas and environments under jurisdiction of the sixth section. This project is the least impacting practical alternative, and we are trying to make the property better environmentally, while also allowing the property owner to add this addition on to enjoy his property. Any area within the vegetated buffer strip will be returned to a natural state to the extent feasible. So impacted areas within the vegetated buffer strip will be reseeded with a native conservation seed mix, and the area currently existing as lawn, as I mentioned before, will be allowed to return, as well as these plantings on the plan that we are proposing to facilitate a expedited regrowth of that natural buffer area. And I am happy to answer any questions that you may have on the project.
Great, thank you very much. Questions from the commissioners? I can start. The pervious turf stone, I think it said it was a cement grid, so just to confirm, there's no plastic with that whole setup?
No, there's no plastic underneath or
Okay.
anything. We're able to do that just by laying it right on the grade.
Okay, and the grid is the concrete grid?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Another question? We may have covered this before, but the area to the left of the house, existing building, has, I think it was maybe plastic that was put down, or because of the runoff from the roof?
Yes, I remember that from the site walk. I'm not sure if that has been removed at this point in time, but I can double check with the property owner and make sure that that is removed as a condition of this.
Okay, thank you.
wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the planning process for the rain garden. Did you do some like percolation tests, and where's the water table, and how did that affect your
Yeah.
design?
So we actually used this New Hampshire Stormwater Management Guide to aid in our design of the rain garden. So we went through each of the steps here to ensure that it was designed to the most stringent standards. So we didn't actually do a soil test, but we designed it to work with clay dominant soils, so the least drainability, which will allow us to confidently say that whatever soil does exist there, it's held to the strictest standard and ensure that it will drain properly, as well as informing us of the size that we needed. So the 20 by 8 rain garden will, through the calculations done from this manual, will allow us to infiltrate 500 square feet of runoff, which will also be aided into the rain garden by a French drain system and an outlet. So the increase in impervious area from the home addition will be about 460 square feet of impervious area. So we ensured that this rain garden would be able to infiltrate that amount that is added on by having this home addition.
But it won't capture like all of the water that would run off of the roof, just that like extra square footage.
Yes, the
basically.
extra square footage, and where the catch basin is located on the back of the property, will also capture some from the existing home. And then the converting the driveway to be those pervious turf stones will also aid in some of the sheet flow, just as a result of runoff on the property, as well as allowing the buffer strip to revegetate, prevent some of those pollutants from entering the resource.
Okay. So you don't actually know quite where the water table is, or how quickly it would percolate there naturally at this point. Did I hear that correctly?
No, not
Yeah.
not how fast it would percolate, but we made sure that, especially with the on the detail, it shows that we would dig out a little extra in order to put an engineered soil mix that will have better drainage than the clay that we planned for.
Okay. And there's no like overflow for that rain garden? It'll just kind of go into the lawn area
Yeah, so there's
if it overtops?
so the on the rain garden detail, on the southern end of the property here, there will be a slight little dip in the berm acting as an outflow structure. So if it fills up and can't infiltrate for a very heavy storm, then it will be just flowing into the lawn area.
Okay. So there's a little bit of a lip around it
Yep,
in
so
the
it will
current
be
design? Okay.
it will be essentially just a depression in the ground that's dug out, and then plantings. There's a great guide online about rain garden plantings, and we're happy to take recommendations as well if the commission has any for the rain garden, and they'll be planted in this depression. Water will flow in from either runoff or the French drain and just percolate down in the soil. If it is a really heavy storm, like I said, on the other end, there will be a slight little outlet depression in the berm, which will allow it to outflow, and so it doesn't flood and completely rip up the rain garden.
Yep, it'll go kind of in the right direction too, away from the house and driveway. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in terms of plantings, the only thing I might offer is to just think about plants that have a little bit of salt tolerance. Just
Yep.
could get a little brackish over time.
Absolutely.
To piggyback on the plantings, the plan that we had in our packet versus this plan that you gave us, you changed the 25-foot wetland buffer line to have it wrap around instead of the one in our packet kind of just went straight down. Are you also then going to make the plantings go around the curve there? Because before they were along the entire kind of stretch of wetland buffer on the edge, but now that you've kind of extended that and curved that around, are we going to continue those plantings?
Yeah, that's something that we can definitely consider. I just did want to mention as well, so the reason that those buffer areas look slightly shifted on the plan that I handed out today was because the land surveyor that we've been working with reached out to me recently when I requested a stamped wetland plan. That's per the last meeting. That was something the commission wanted to see, was a wetland stamp and the date of delineation. And the land surveyor reached out to me and said that the plan that I'd been working with since September was actually the wrong line, and so he sent me an updated version which caused the shift in the buffer areas. So just had to revise those, and the project remained largely the same, but just shifted slightly based on the most current delineation.
Great, thank you.
So the number of plantings remains the same?
Well, that was something that we had agreed with the property owner on, but that's something that is subject to change. I'm sure he'd be willing to add more plantings and develop a more extensive living shoreline plan.
Yeah, it's also about, on the original plan, the 9 hibiscus were shown, and they're not. So I'm just making sure that the number of plants remains the same.
Yes, the number of plants is remaining the same, yeah.
Question about the French drain. It looks like the base for the driveway intersects the gravel for the French drain. Could you just describe whether or not that's an issue or like how they...
The base, sorry, could you explain that again?
So it looks like the area of the driveway overlaps the line of the French drain,
Yes.
and there's compacted base below that material that you're using on the driveway. So I just wondered if that has impact on the French drain.
Yeah, so the French drain will be installed before the driveway is converted to pervious, so it'll run underneath the turf stone pavers.
Yeah, just, I guess my question is that there's some amount of compacted base for that runs over. It just looks like they would intersect, and it's two different materials with different drainage.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. So that area that will intersect the French drain, we can determine how deep that goes as well on the detail. So the depth can vary, and we can ensure that those areas don't interact.
Okay. The reason for the question was just like, would you be creating like some kind of stop in the flow there or something with the compacted base? But I guess it doesn't sound like.
Yeah, no, we would make sure that it is able to work efficiently and not impede the ability to shuttle that storm water into the rain garden.
Okay, thanks.
Question about your silt sock placement.
Yep.
So it looks like it just like cuts right across, I don't know, the property, going right into the 25-foot buffer, and I was wondering if it could just, hug the 25-foot buffer. It's going, yeah.
Yeah.
It shows that it's going right across, but instead could it go up and like protect that 25-foot buffer above it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We can definitely make that edit to make sure that it.
It's protecting the whole,
it protects the whole
25-foot buffer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. then I had one or two more questions. What's the elevation of the basement for the new structure? Or is there going to be a basement?
I believe there will be a basement. I believe I added the architectural plans. I'm not sure that this has an elevation on it, but is this for the building permit for the FEMA flood zone?
Well, yeah, and I mean, if it doesn't meet what it needs to, and you have to change the plans, that then will ultimately, could potentially impact, you know, what you have to do and what we have purview over, so that's why I was asking.
I am not entirely sure on the elevation of the new basement. I can reach out to the contractor and make sure that that is,
It has to be, is it 10 feet?
Yep, eight plus two. Base flood elevation there is 8 feet, so any ground floor would have to start at 10 feet. So I think, I actually just saw in the plans that, I think there was some elevations or topo drawn in here. So it looks like it's really close to 10 feet at ground level right there where the addition's going in, but if a basement is gonna be dug below that, that would come up against the floodplain ordinance for Portsmouth, so there would be some tricky issues with what could go in that basement or if the basement could be built at all.
and that is for flood zone AE.
Yes, I think that's A, or that's X.
So from this survey, it looks like, I guess the foundation would be mostly in flood zone X.
There was a discussion about it in the first meeting or at the actual site, because there were comments about sunk pumps going on permanently and not managing to empty the water.
Yeah, I think maybe our big concern is just that before you get any final planning board approvals, that you have the final design figured out and that you've talked with staff to determine what the elevation has to be at. Because if it turns out that you'll need to redesign the whole basement or get rid of the basement in the future, you might have to go back to certain boards to readjust plans. So we don't want you to have to go back all the way to the beginning.
One more question. On your, do you have where you're planning to put the buffer boundary markers anywhere on your plans?
I added a note that said that the wetland boundary markers will be added, I think just where the delineation occurred, so.
The 25-foot buffer?
It's on the wetland edge right now.
Oh, it's on the wetland edge right now?
Yeah.
Oh, for each of the buffers, add markers for those during construction?
I mean, how are you going to make sure that the no-mow line stays like where it is? Like, I was thinking putting up the wetland buffer boundary markers there just to also give an indication of where that line
Yeah.
is for mowing, but
Yeah, that's something.
also, I don't know if you want to put like physical, like rock, boulders
Yeah.
to more delineate that. I don't know if they have a service that mows for them or if they do it, but making sure the service knows exactly, where they can and cannot mow, because for a while it's gonna not be that clear, I think,
Yeah.
until it really grows in.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, putting some sort of indicator on the 25-foot setback so that the property owner knows where he can and cannot mow.
Yeah.
And that's something that I can definitely add to the plan
Okay.
as well, whether it be something natural looking, like you said, a rock, or
Yeah.
actual
Every
stakes.
certain amount of feet, whatever looks,
Mhm.
makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be nice for the markers to be on that 25-foot line anyway, just that's a nice reminder that this is the,
Yep.
and it also just keeps those, just posts into, like, right into the wetland edge there, where it's just so sensitive. and
Yeah.
I'm sure it's already a little eroding, and
Absolutely. The zoning ordinance, just the specific rule says permanent wetland boundary markers shall be shown, which is what I thought that meant, the actual resource delineation edge.
I think it's like kind of just where it makes most sense for each property, and I think in this case, I think the 25-foot buffer is probably where it makes most sense to put them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And kind of going with that, I had a question. You had a note, probably, I think, more towards the beginning of the application about the boundary markers and that they'd be installed after construction or during. But usually we like to see those put up before construction starts so that people, when they're constructing, see it throughout the project and it stays up permanently. So I don't know if you can change the wording of that
Yeah,
somewhere in the beginning, but
absolutely.
just to say prior to the start of construction.
just a question about the view shed, just because I'm not that familiar with how those are, like, managed. I mean, you don't anticipate there being any concerns with, letting the grass grow tall, maybe even letting a few small bushes grow up in that buffer that also overlaps with the view shed?
Yeah, I think that view easement, I believe on the boundary plan, there's a height set. It's mainly for actual construction, like
Right,
building a
yeah.
house in there. They got approval for the addition being a certain height to be built within there, to ensure the abutting property doesn't have to deal with someone putting up a very tall house and then they can't enjoy their property.
Okay.
Also, there's a note on the plan that said it also can't be like vehicle storage or like, it says or parking. But it doesn't say anything, at least in the note about,
But woody plants, yeah, which is great.
maybe like a big tree might be an issue, but like,
Right. Makes sense, just to make sure.
are we ready for a motion? Okay. Go ahead, Barbara.
I'll make a motion to approve 39, or make a recommendation to approve 39 Dearborn Street with some stipulations, and I might need help on this, but to remove the plastic, I think it's like on the northwest side of the house, and to provide the basement elevation to meet the Portsmouth floodplain ordinances requirement, and to include it in the planning board application. And to put the wetland buffer boundary markers and possibly in addition to boulders or other markers at the no-mow line, at the 25-foot buffer. And then also this one I'm not sure everybody wants to do, but to continue the plantings around to the new deleted buffer on the site development plans. And continue would be, I kind of counted it out, there's 17 existing now, so maybe another 10 plantings or something.
Yep, just curve around the bottom edge of the property.
Yeah.
There's also Sam's suggestion to have the silt sock run round the 25-foot buffer.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Kate, with the placement of the buffers, having placement of the boundary markers, have them being put up before construction. That's all I have for stipulations. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Second? Discussion?
It's a tough one. It's all 100% in there almost, so.
I mean,
Well,
one thing,
if we, considering the stipulations that you've just made, My main concern is about the basement height, and that being flooded or not permanently. So if that can be sorted, I think it's fine to go ahead.
Well, I think also too, if that basement, like you said, is gonna be continuously flooded, like where is all that water gonna be pumped to? That's gonna be important to us. Because if it's heading towards that rain garden, then that's not sized appropriately.
Is there any kind of regulation as to where water being pumped out of a basement should go? Does it go into the sewer, the city water, or does it go into a yard?
I'm not sure, but I think we might have found out the DES regulations when we went to that site out at Newcastle a couple months ago, Newcastle Avenue, that they kind of just outletted right into the river. So I'm not sure about stormwater. Might be someone in here that I know, but
You might know.
we don't have any regulations, I don't believe, on where some pumps can be pumped to.
I don't know, so.
I think it still would be important to try to
Yeah.
infiltrate it, like, before it reaches the wetlands, so that would kind of impact what we end up doing, which is why the stipulation was on there, that we kind of need to get that elevation of basement, and if it does mean, if the basement can be there, I don't know, and I guess it is gonna require sumps having notation of where it's gonna go. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it matters what's in the basement, too.
That's true, yeah,
So, it's like,
right.
it's stored there.
Maybe Alice's point earlier about French drain going through the new pervious driveway. I wonder if that's something that we could ask to like see a
Cross-section.
cross-section of how they plan to thread it, or if they plan to go around it, just to see that it won't impact the.
That's a fairly long section of the French drain that is impacted by the, or does intersect the impervious turf stone. So it does need to, function appropriately.
There's a little cross-section here, perimeter French drain. Maybe that's different than the,
Well, that's what it looks like if it's not where the
where the,
turf stone is gonna be, because the
Driveway,
turf stone is down lower and has a different, like Alice was saying, a different, base.
Got
It's
it.
much more compact, and if that French drain is gonna go through that without having its, not compacted surroundings, it's not gonna function right.
it's just gonna be a pipe,
Right.
not a perforated thing.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to add that as a condition, or is that something to make
To see a cross-section of the.
the
where
intersection of the two
Yeah, I
things?
think so.
Or
Have that be a, I don't know, what is this section? Yeah, a detail, yeah.
And there's no city stormwater infrastructure on this, in this part of the neighborhood, right? There's no grates, there's no pipes.
No,
outlets,
not
or
on-
outfalls.
No, not near this property. At least none that this project will be able to utilize or impact. I believe as it exists now, the water just essentially flows down Dearborn Street and goes right into the resource.
Yep. I mean, and I guess it's just worth, making sure the landowner understands, right? Like, I'm sure there's some concern about, rising seas and, protecting that shoreline edge, right? That's their property boundary. They're gonna be really
Yeah.
bothered to see erosion happening there, but that erosion is coming from both directions, right? From the tidal
Yeah.
waters as well as from the storm water, so like,
Yeah.
kind of controlling that.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the upland area will be helpful to their, like, long-term property. And it does,
Sorry,
go ahead.
ahead.
Yeah.
Do you wanna come up, John, and?
Are you gonna call it public comment?
Sure. Are you public comment? Please.
I was gonna say a few words, but
Yeah.
Come on
No,
up.
it's helpful.
No. Just,
You twist my arm.
if you bring the drawing down, the flood line, flood hazard line, goes through the proposed addition. And under the FEMA rules, the
State your name and,
oh, sorry, John Chagnon,
yep.
not in a butter, just generally hearing your discussion. Certified floodplain surveyor, so I can opine a little bit for you to make it clearer. The flood zone line goes through the building, and therefore the lowest floor elevation has to be at or above the flood elevation. So there won't be a basement, because a basement is defined as a space that becomes the new floor elevation. There could be a crawl space, though, and a crawl space is defined as anything that is 4 feet from first floor to lower floor or less. So that is where they might head if they're going to comply with that.
So no
unless-
basement, potentially a crawl space.
A crawl space.
Okay.
But they could propose to fill in front of the building to create a change to the flood zone line, but that process is another option, but it's not before you.
Okay.
Well, there's the FEMA rules and then there's the city's ordinance, which are two separate things, I think, right?
Right, we just add on that extra 2 feet.
Yeah.
So where it's 8 over there, it'll be 10 feet is where the first floor or the basement, whatever, the ground level will have to start.
Yeah. And that probably just goes for the new development, like the new part of the building, not the old part of the building?
Right, a substantial renovation or reconstruction. So it's, if it's more than 40% of the cost of the
Nope.
building, then that's considered a substantial reconstruction or addition. So the addition would count for having to be above what the existing home already was.
But they wouldn't be expected to like elevate the
re-
older part of the
existing-
home?
No. Unless they were doing substantial construction on that portion.
New construction has to comply.
Construction.
Renovations have a threshold, like you said, 40% of value.
Which this might be, but.
Okay. So we've got our motion, we've seconded it, we have our stipulations.
Can I just raise one other, I'm just kind of curious, we are allowing a rain garden, in the buffer, which I think is typically something we don't typically allow. I just feel like it's worth just like acknowledging that that's
Yeah.
a choice we're making. I'm not quite sure how to think about that myself.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way it can be outside the 100-foot buffer. It is outside the 50-foot buffer. It could be more outside the 50-foot buffer. But that's where it is right now.
Right.
But yeah, not to set a precedent, like this is, yeah.
I mean, it's almost kind of a two-part issue, right? It's like impact to the buffer, and it may or may not function super well over time, just given the high water table there but
Yeah, my thought also though is that is grass right
Right,
now, so it's
yeah.
not, and it's not part of the area that they were going to naturalize. Mm-hmm. So that's just part
it's
of
gonna
my
get planted.
thinking.
It'll be
Yeah.
something maybe a little, true, like it could be a little better than a lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did you want to add to the stipulations,
Oh, yeah.
the cross-section part?
Cross-section?
Probably have to formalize that.
A cross-section of where the French drain intersects with the turf
Yes.
zone driveway area.
Yep. So we'll add that as a stipulation. Who seconded that?
Stuart.
Stuart, are you okay with that added stipulation? Okay. In that case, do we have any more discussion? Are we ready for a vote?
So we don't have to worry about the new basement, doing a crawl space kind of thing would be later on through that process when they provide the elevation.
Yeah.
Okay. So they might have to come back to us? Probably not.
If they change the impact numbers, like the footprint, if they choose to get rid of the basement and just do a crawl space, then it probably won't come back to us, but
What if they do the fill, like adding fill? Does that come back to us?
no, because, well, I'm not sure, that would be earth placement. That's a good question, they might have to, they definitely have to go back to DS for a change of their permit. But if you'd like to see that come back, if fill is being proposed, then that could be a condition.
That- How do people feel about it if they end up adding fill? Do we want them to come back? I mean, I'm assuming it would just be like in the front of that new area?
And just to add a note, the footprint near closer to the edge of the property where the proposed landing and window well are, that will not be part of the foundation. So it would, if there were going to be fill, it would just be kind of where that little jut out is of the existing structure in the areas that we already have denoted as impacts, just where machinery will go in order to construct the addition.
So I should have asked this before, but the window well is then indicating that there is a window in the foundation to the basement? Is that correct? I mean, why would you need a window well if there was no window at that level? Am I reading that?
I think when we were on the site walk, we talked to the property owner and he mentioned that the window well was like a bulkhead, I think.
Yeah, I believe on the foundation plan, the window well is shown. I think it is more of a bulkhead. That's the first floor plan. There's one that is the foundation plan. Yes, so it is actually a bulkhead. And so, sorry, I misspoke. Just the landing area will be, and the bulkhead will be in that flood zone X or AE. And those areas would be the only areas that would need to add a bit of fill in order to make it compliant with the flood zone regulations.
So there's going to be a basement.
I mean, that's
That'll be
showing,
fully blue,
yeah,
you know,
that's showing
water table.
stairs.
Right, so X
And
and
a bulkhead.
AE will
Yeah.
have to comply with the 10 feet. So if there is a basement proposed, it would have to not have any utilities, or there are a lot of restrictions on what could be in the basement if there is to be a basement, but I think that's something that we'll solve before we get to the building permit process, but it would be good to get that floodplain elevation certificate from FEMA.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have that as a stipulation already with the figuring out the elevations and stuff. So.
Sure.
Okay, are we ready for a motion?
Oops, a vote?
I mean, yeah, I meant a vote. We've already done a motion. And Talia, you're voting. I'm voting. Yeah.
Did I miss
Okay.
that?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the conditional use permit for the Pease wetland at 282 Corporate Drive, and also a state wetland bureau application. Do we need to make a motion to hear them together?
I think so, just because they're separated on the
Okay.
agenda.
Does someone want to make a motion to hear those, the conditional use and the state permit together? And I guess we'll vote on them separately, but right in a row.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we examine both those permits together.
Second? I'll second. Okay. All in favor? Okay, great. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission, John Shagnon from Haley Ward, representing Port City Air and Great Circle Catering with this application. The project timeline, just for reference, is that we started in June with a concept approval from Pease Development Authority. In October and November, we worked with the Portsmouth Technical Advisory Committee to perfect the site plan elements and the technical elements of the site plan. And then on December 4th, you folks had a site walk at the site. to review the proposals that you have before you. There's two items, a P's conditional use permit and a wetland board minimum impact permit application. So first I'm going to talk about the wetland conditional use permit. And that conditional use permit, since it is under P's Development Authority area, it is going to be looked at under their ordinance section in Article 304-A.08, use of the wetlands requiring a conditional use permit. Section 304A.079 does allow drainage ways and stormwater treatment structures to be constructed and as allowed in the buffer. This is the P's rules. But in this particular application, the removal of pavement and concrete pads, removing impervious surfaces out of the buffer, qualifies for the requirement that we obtain a P's wetland conditional use permit. So according to P's Development Authority ordinances, we have 5 criteria to meet. The first is that the land is reasonably suited to the use. We propose that this proposal before you is to remove existing non-conforming site, impervious surface improvements, and create stormwater treatment enhancements. And given that the existing lot contains an existing commercial site development which has been there for some time, we would submit that the land is reasonably suited to the revised use, giving the proposed alterations. And I probably should have done this before going through the criteria, but the proposal that you have before you is to remove some pavement on the left side of this exhibit, construct a rain garden, and then upgrade an existing swale so that there can be positive drainage from the existing parking lot. Currently, that parking lot, which was constructed a long time ago for the Pease Air Force Base, this was the Officers Club, has silted up the drainage way that exits the parking area, and that silting up has caused water to back up and impacts the usability of that parking area, causing the parking area to delaminate and be in disrepair, but also causing there to be a backup of water onto the parking area when there are rainstorms. So the purple area is an area where we'll be reconstructing a swale on the part that is facing down and then digging out some material in an existing swale, that material which has been deposited over time, most likely due to the sanding of the parking lot and the runoff of that sand into the adjacent swales. The orange area on the right is an area in the buffer that is an existing concrete pad that will be removed. So we're removing impervious surface in the buffer. Going back to the criteria, the second criteria is that there's no alternative location outside of the wetland buffer that is feasible and reasonable for the proposed use. Due to the location of the swales and the pads, which are within the wetland and wetland buffers, the location of the concrete pad removal and swale regrading work are fixed. The required parking for the site use dictates the extent of pavement which can be removed and still provide conforming parking, and the rain garden construction following the pavement removal work is set as far away from the resource as possible to achieve the required rain garden sizing. Next criteria is there will be no adverse impact on the wetland functions and values of the site or surrounding properties. We believe the proposal will not significantly impact the existing wetland resource located adjacent to the site and its current functions and values. To the contrary, we believe the project will be a benefit. The proposed project removes impervious surfaces within the wetland buffer and provides enhanced stormwater treatment. Since the project will improve water quality entering the nearby wetland resource, the revisions will have no adverse impact on the wetland functional values and the surrounding properties. Fourth criteria is that alteration of the natural vegetated state or managed woodland will occur only to the extent necessary to achieve construction goals. The proposed project does not include alteration other than the grading of any naturally vegetated area to accommodate the work at the site. The plans call for some removal of invasive species in the natural upland area, which is an improvement of the existing condition. And that removal of invasives is on the edge of the existing tree. It's noted on, tree edge, it's noted on the plan. The fifth criteria and final one is that potential impacts have been avoided to the maximum extent practicable, and unavoidable impacts have been minimized, and we submit that the project represents the alternative with the least adverse impacts to areas and environments while allowing reasonable reuse of the property. The proposal avoids the wetland buffer to the greatest extent practicable while providing reasonable reuse for the property owner. The project also provides numerous components which will serve to improve stormwater quality, treatment, and infiltration on the subject property. So those criteria, we believe, have been met, and we request that you recommend approval of the conditional use permit to the Portsmouth Planning Board. And the other thing that we are asking for the board to recommend is a recommendation to the Department of Environmental Services regarding the minimum impact expedited permit. And we've submitted that application as a part of the record. Hopefully you're taking a look at it. And my understanding of the process is if you would vote today to sign the application, I have a signature page that we would bring up, and then we would come back with the 4 or 5 complete packets with the signature, because we need to get the city clerk to sign them all. So this project involves, in the area in blue on the plan, it involves work in the wetland. The swale and the old swale were delineated as wetland areas, so the reconstruction of the swale exiting the parking lot, which is facing up and down on this sketch, and then the excavation of the swale going left and right, which is needed to provide proper drainage for this existing parking lot, involves impacts into the wetland resource. The square footage is 1,448 square feet, and the material consists of road sand and other fines that have been washed into the swale since the last maintenance. There are some invasive species which will be removed. We have erosion and sediment control notes and general condition notes in the plan set, and maintenance and protection notes, and detail C3 on sheet C3. Dewatering of the dredge material is not anticipated or proposed. If needed, dredge material will be stockpiled in an upland area protected by temporary erosion and sediment control and allowed to drain freely. We do have notes, and we talked about at the site walk, the reuse of that material as it has to stay on site in a planted in a berm area to the right of the building as you face it from the street. Additionally, that material will be, as needed if required, capped. Stormwater drains from the parking lot, and the contamination is, as controlled by the Peace Development Authority, may contain PFAS. It's not going to be tested, but since that is presumed, the spoil material needs to stay on the site of existence at the moment. So the maintenance does not involve in-water work and will utilize temporary erosion and sediment controls. Therefore, specific project timing is not necessary to minimize impacts to the aquatic resource. That is the reading from the minimum impact expedited permit application. The commission at the site walk did identify the fact that the existing lawn area does protrude into the 25-foot wetland buffer, and I spoke to Port City Air, and they are very much in favor of placing 25-foot buffer markers along that 25-foot edge, and then letting the area beyond that revegetate to a natural state, so they would not mow that anymore. So those buffer flags would start at the building here on the right side of the page, because obviously the work that we're doing for the rain garden, et cetera, would not have a wetland buffer marker, but going from the left edge of the building and around to the front where the 25-foot setback is, we would propose to place wetland buffer boundary markers and not maintain the area beyond that, grow back to natural vegetation. If you have any questions, be glad to answer them. And
I had so beyond the rain garden, where you're removing some pavement,
Yes.
is anything gonna be planted there? For where pavement's been removed, but where the rain garden is not going? I know there's a little bit of area.
We could, I don't know, I would let that naturally vegetate back. The rain garden berm needs to be maintained, so
Yeah.
woody vegetation doesn't grow into it.
So maybe just like a conservation mix put down and then just let
Okay.
it
Yep.
kinda go?
Yeah, we could also note that.
And then on that point of the rain garden, you said that area, there's a lot of filling in by sanding and salting probably. Are you concerned about that impacting the rain garden going forward with whatever maintenance they do for storms on that pavement?
Sure. So as a part of the ongoing and long-term rain garden maintenance, you may have to occasionally remove built up, sediment that builds up in the rain garden.
Because it's getting its water from sheet flow right from the parking lot?
Yes.
So it's going to collect and take with it anything that's on there? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So it would have to be like dug out, I guess, to,
It may need to be occasionally redug, yes.
and there's no other kind of way to prevent whatever comes with the sheet flow?
So
Before it gets to the rain garden?
there are ways, if you had the height differential if you catch basined and collected the water, you could
Yeah.
put deep sumps, but this doesn't have the separation.
Yeah.
So if you did do a barrier that would slow down and collect sediment, it becomes a barrier to the water flow.
You're
and
just going to have to clean that out, too?
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
Is that called out in your rain garden maintenance plan, that it'll have to be periodically?
It should, and it usually is in the maintenance plan. It talks about the rain garden, observing that the rain garden drains in the period of time after the storm. So when it's not draining, that's an indication that the area has become clogged with sediment.
It is, I do see it on the plan, yeah. Page
And
31.
since it's a parking lot, I suspect there's going to be snow removal and salting. Is there any kind of plan around that? Where's the snow going to be stored? And about the impact of the salt going into the wetland?
So I believe you identified the fact that this went through site plan approval with the PDA, and we didn't identify snow storage areas. That's a good point. Most likely, there would be a snow would be plowed to the left side, because otherwise plowing it adjacent to the rain garden is in an aisle, so the most likely place to store the snow is going to be in the parking spaces and immediately adjacent to them as needed on the left side of the page, as you see here. So that's what I can say at this point.
Okay.
The runoff will eventually, the runoff does go through, at least from the northerly half of the parking lot, does go through the rain garden, which, as you know, works through the winter. As far as salting goes, we can encourage Port City Air to participate with whomever contractor they decide to use for plowing, participate in the salt minimization program with DES. That's a great program and
Yeah. Please.
provides some benefits. But that will sort of be up to the contractor they choose to do the work, as you know.
Okay.
So as follow-up to that, so this is eventually draining to Hodgson Brook, which is impaired for chloride. So I think, and you probably want to check on this with PDA, but they do have a management plan for chloride reduction, which includes using the Green Snow Pro certification or practices. I think it's certified winter maintenance. In addition to that, would be when you're talking about the rain garden getting, sand and salt from the area, is to have a schedule for sweeping the parking lot in the spring, like early April, but preferably a couple of times, during the year, but definitely in the spring after the applications have been done. And that would help manage that. I have another question about the maintenance plan. Mentions, I think somewhere in there, in the proposal, it talks about bittersweet as being sort of your focus of invasive
Correct.
species to remove. And the maintenance plan doesn't really reference that at all. It does reference,
It references keeping track of invasives and keeping them from coming back, but we could add in specifics.
yeah, because it's a little different than the purple loosestrife or the Phragmites and stuff, as far as, maybe a little more specifics on that, coming back and cutting again and checking
Right.
for it. Because that would be awesome to get rid of those if you can.
Yeah, I mean, you can cut and dab, I think.
Say that again, sorry.
Cut and dab,
Yeah, and come back.
and then come back, yeah.
Come back.
Yeah. It's interesting that the bittersweet is not penetrated beyond the edge canopy.
I know, that's cool. That's so weird.
Well, that's good.
Right, it's probably the lack of, yeah,
What's wet?
yeah.
So this is John Bartis from Port City Air, and he's letting me know that he's been in touch with management and they don't use salt. Snow will be pushed to the north and go into the stormwater system. So on the north side of the parking lot towards Corporate Drive, it runs out to Corporate Drive and enters that system.
So that would be great to include in the proposal or the plan, in the maintenance plan,
Yep.
reference to that.
So to the front of the parking lot there.
Push the snow to the front.
Yeah, okay.
And there is an area there. could be stored, the snow could be stored outside of the parking stripes, so you don't reduce the parking. We did, if your recommendations could include these, we could follow up. We're on schedule for a meeting next week, and so all the material's been submitted. I don't think the board wants additional plans at this point, but we'd be glad to do that for the wetland app. And then the normal process was a little bit convoluted with the understanding of whether or not we had to come here or not. So hopefully you can recommend approval to the planning board with these as conditions, and we can follow through.
Any other questions? Would someone like to make a motion and take a stab at the stipulations?
I have one question.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry. And just to clarify on the trees, I was wondering, when you're looking at the top of this plan, I think, or the one we were looking at earlier with the green. I'm sorry. Yeah. So when we were at the site, you mentioned that there would be tree removal, those large trees going down. There were 2 large trees that were going through the swale that goes into the.
Right, the trees in the swale, yeah.
And then, there's been so much growing back that there's an awful lot of other trees on either side of that, and you kind of insinuated that that there would have to be some clearing there.
For the
so
side
that-
slopes of the
yes, you
swale.
Maintain.
I think I misspoke, though. Going to the left, the tree line is outside of the influence of where we're going to put the rain garden.
You misspoke on that, or that's?
When we were at the meeting, I thought there'd be more tree cutting going to the left, beyond the swale, but I don't think there is, because if you look at where the tree line is shown, we're not impacting the tree line.
Okay, so to the left, you really are not cutting any trees?
Right.
So can you include that in the plan? No cut area, no tree cutting, or no tree cutting beyond a certain, whatever. I know you're going to have to take out invasives, but if you could, because there's can be such a disconnect in between what you guys have if it's not in the plan.
So I understand, the note on the plan does say that the invasive removals has to follow the DES standards, so I would imagine somewhere in there it says just take the invasives and don't take other trees while you're there, but.
Yeah, and just, but more importantly, I guess, is to just show where that area is on the plan, so.
And
Go ahead.
and the area for where you are removing those invasives. You talk about that's all along that tree line, but specifically calling it out on the plan.
Because once the trees, if they come in and somebody's cutting, more, then there's no going back. And it's great that you're leaving it, because it has grown up.
Any more questions?
No, sorry.
No, you're good. Okay, who wants to try the motion? We'll help you with the stipulations.
I can try. So I'd like to make a motion to advance 282 Corporate Drive for both the conditional use permit and the.
Should we vote on do motions separately for that?
Yeah, okay.
All right, so let's start with just the conditional use permit.
Okay. With the following stipulations, I just have 3, so maybe you guys can add the, that they use Green Snow Pro contractors. I know sounds like that's the default, but let's just, specify that. Sweeping the lot a couple times a year to minimize the amount of sediment that goes into the wetland. And then, being really clear on the plan where that, there isn't going to be any tree cutting, except for in that kind of that additional, getting the water from the parking lot to the swale. And And I guess maybe the fourth thing was just specifying where the invasive removal would be happening on the plan. That's what I heard.
I also had, putting the buffer markers at the 25-foot buffer line.
I was going to mention that also.
Yeah. And then, I don't know if it's maybe just making a note on the plan that's saying beyond that, you're just gonna let it, that is a no-mow zone.
Correct, yes.
And then in that area where pavement is being removed, but where the rain garden will not be, putting down conservation seed mix, and again, just letting it no-mow revegetate. I also had, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sometimes the plants have been around a while, but I think in the rain garden itself, that's what we've called for that. Just give me a second here. So there's a note in the rain garden detail that the rain garden is to be seeded with riparian buffer mix.
So I guess this is the area,
So just define that to be from the pavement edge to the edge of the woods.
yeah, because you're removing more
Yep.
pavement than just where the rain garden is going. And so just not having bare soil, just throwing down some conservation seed.
Oh,
mix.
absolutely, yeah. You would need to
Yeah.
revegetate it.
Yep. And then making a note that, if there isn't a note, that snow storage or is going to the north side of the property to enter the stormwater system. And then you had about bittersweet removal, just more specifics
Yeah, just more
pertaining
information.
to that.
In the invasive species part of the maintenance plan.
So
It's
just put
working
it on the
fine.
map and put it on the maintenance.
So
plan.
if we could, if we could just say maybe
I've got the written ones.
that only the invasives will be removed. You know, we haven't done a specific tree-by-tree survey, you know, it's a lot of, if that's appropriate, that only the invasive species will be removed.
In the buffer, in the 25-foot buffer
Yeah.
coming from the,
Right, in the buffer. And obviously, trees that have been killed by the bittersweet would come down as a part of that.
I mean, they don't need to necessarily.
yeah.
I mean, they have habitat value just as dead trees too.
Great to leave them if you can, but.
Is that the BMP, is just cut the vine and leave the tree up there with the vine on it?
Yeah, a lot of times it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you still got to watch out, but.
Right. I think if it's like the hydra, it just grows again, but
Yeah.
it goes down instead of up.
Is everyone good with those stipulations?
Yeah.
So what would that note be on the invasives?
Well, I wasn't, I guess, so worried about the BMPs as acknowledging that, to follow the BMPs. So just a note of, to follow the BMPs, the recommended BMPs, or what is it? Is it
Okay.
DOTs or do you?
DES, I think we put that
DES
note
has
on
it
there,
now.
so, let's see.
Did you want to make it anything specific towards bittersweet, or?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Specific BMPs for removing bittersweet.
Okay,
um,
yep,
So that, yeah, so they're continuing to come back.
we can add that, sure, yep.
Thank you. You good?
Yep.
Second?
Let's take that motion.
Second, okay. Discussion? I feel like we have enough stipulations on there based on how little we can actually control, since their buffers are much smaller than ours. We ready for a vote? This is for the conditional use permit, and then we'll do a vote for the state. So all in favor? Opposed? Okay. And then would someone like to make a motion for the state permit? And this is a motion to sign, because you already have it, right? It's a motion to sign.
Motion to sign to expedite the minimum
expedite.
impact
Okay.
application.
And then do they
So we-
see this whole discussion? Do they see the like stipulations? that
So, not usually with the way this got a little funky with the timing, but not usually, but if you want DES to see all the conditions of the P's CUP, we could do that in like a separate letter, listing out that we saw this as a P's wetland CUP and this state permit, and that we'd like to acknowledge these were said. It might have an impact.
Like that would probably be helpful.
Sorry, we could also revise the plans to address the comments before we bring it for signature, if that's appropriate too.
But that would mean I wouldn't sign today. Is that right?
You'd sign when he comes back with a revised.
Well, if you could sign today, but she's not going to accept them
Right.
without the changes, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, you'd have to sign it once the revised version is seen by the whole convention.
Oh, okay, so never mind that. We'll go back to your other
So it
thing.
usually goes out by email to everybody, and they have to decide
Yeah.
whether or not they would like to see it in a formal meeting, or if they would like the chair to sign it. But if there's going to be changes to this one that we've already seen, then we're probably going to have to do it the same way and send it out again.
So then preferably to keep this moving along, it would be to send these as a letter for the DES, right?
Yeah.
Probably for,
Yeah.
probably for you.
That's, okay.
Pretty expedited.
Okay. So then it would be a motion to recommend approval. No, it would be a motion to sign for the minimum expedited impact.
To expedite the application.
You're that.
Got it.
That. Okay, well, I can't make the motion.
Then that's fine. If not,
Okay. I can't make the motion, so does someone else want to try what she just said?
So we just did the conditional use, right? And now we're gonna do the,
State.
so making a motion to sign the
to expedite
expedite the permit to DES.
Yes.
And also submit a letter explaining the stipulations that we are requesting under the conditional use permit in Portsmouth. Okay.
That sounds great. Is there a second?
Yes.
Second.
Second that.
I'm assuming there's no further discussion. We're good on doing the letter. It's everything we talked about for the CUP. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do I need to, I'll sign that after, right now? Or are we done? Are we done?
We got one more, which he is also presenting.
Okay. I just lost it. Oh, yeah, Sagamore. I forgot about Sagamore.
I'm gonna need to leave at 5:30, just.
All right, we'll just go to the next one. We'll sign at the end then. So next on the agenda is the DES wetland application for, what is it?
9:13.
913 Sagamore. Hello again.
Hello again, Madam Chair and members of the Conservation Commission. John Shagnon from Haley Ward, representing Hogs Wave LLC at 913 Sagamore. The application is for a wetland permit. The timeline is that the Conservation Commission reviewed this application at a few meetings, and October 9th, we obtained a recommendation for approval, which we went on to the planning board with, and that had three conditions: that we specify 2-inch planting for the new red oaks, that we use or put on the plans that they'll follow the NOFA standards, and that put in the boundary, the buffer markers. those conditions, 1 and 2, were updated on the plans. So when the planning board approved the project, the only condition was that the boundary markers be placed. Those are identified. As to location on the plan, the project needed a variance, which it obtained on November 19th, and then the planning board approval was on November 21st. We were waiting until the variance to come back, and the planning board to come back here to submit the wetlands permit in case there were any other changes that were required in the process of getting the other city approvals. So none happening to the plan. It's essentially the same project that you saw, and we worked through issues with. So we are asking for you to recommend the approval to the DES, and that's for permanent impact of 2719 in the previously developed tidal buffer zone. That's for the removal and replacement of the structure, and then 6,855 square feet of temporary impact in the 100-foot previously developed tidal buffer zone. And that is to remove some pavement, to put in a replacement retaining wall, construct some walkways, and do some buffer plantings. So I think all in all, the project was reviewed, and I think we met the criteria necessary for the conditional use permit, which also, although they're not specifically the criteria for wetland approval, it's apples and apples. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I didn't see any plans for this application, and that might be just, that's what we had in our packets. There's no plans. I don't know if anybody else saw plans with them.
I didn't have any plans.
Just the digital one didn't have site plans.
There should have been submitted the same plans that were submitted for the conditional use permit. There haven't been any changes to the plans. Well,
But you
other
did
than
update the conditions.
changing the caliper of the tree and making sure the NOFA standards were on there.
So can we see those after, well, it's hard because it's DES. So it's not the same plans, so unfortunately it's sort of, the only changes are the ones that we had required, right?
So just looking, I'll look for the truly revisions. Hard to read the revision dates. If you give me a minute, I can pull from the letter to the planning board that talks about the changes.
Okay. And I guess what I'm thinking is, if it's possible, like if we approve this and you could just provide the plans to Kate or whatever that you have.
Yeah, I
Like
guess
sort
if
of on
you're
that
pulling
condition.
up some plans, Kate?
This is from the planning board from November that you went to, that it was approved at, so
Okay. So the proposed northern red oak should be at least 2-inch caliper sizing. This has been noted in the buffer planting schedule on sheet C104. So bottom right, yeah, that's the buffer planting schedule in the upper left. And if you raise it up, I think you see 2 inches in the oak caliper there. So we changed that. That's, and then as far as the NOFA standards, that was noted in the vegetated practice section on sheet C501. So if you go to sheet C501, which is at the end of the set, and then, yep, to the left there, There, I think it's in the top part of those, yeah, vegetative practice. Yeah, there you go.
I know for standards.
So those are the only changes.
And then, do we have showing where the boundary markers are gonna be placed? Is that on one of the plans too?
Yes, so the boundary markers are on two plans. The plan C100, existing conditions and demolition plan shows the markers, let's see. Oh, no, maybe it's the overall site plan. Yeah, the overall site plan, C101, shows the markers that are out of view on the other sheet. And that is right, down, nope, the other, down. Right there in the middle where it says buffer marker, typical. So there's one over there for the 100-foot. And then because of the development, you go to the landscape plan, I believe. And that shows the other markers. So there's 3 that will be placed at the edge of the
Okay, I see.
newly planted buffer.
Okay.
And they follow that 1 every 50-foot rule. So
Okay.
there's one
Thank you.
there. Okay?
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yep, thank you.
Any other questions?
In the very beginning, did you mention that the stipulation of having the buffer markers would not be included? Or that was not? Or did I misinterpret what you said?
So your recommendation is sent to the planning board, and between your meeting and submitting for planning board, we usually show how we would meet your recommendations, and we did. The planning board kept as a condition that the buffer markers would be placed.
Oh, okay. I just completely heard you wrong. Okay, thank you.
So the planning board approval is subject to putting the buffer markers in.
You good?
Thank you.
Okay, you ready to make a motion? Yeah? Okay. This is for a state permit, if that helps anybody. State Wetland Bureau permit. We're recommending approval.
Yeah.
Take it away.
I recommend approval for the state wetland permit for 913 Sagamore.
Excellent.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I think we're good. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Other business, I had one thing I just wanted to update on the Cavaretta property that I went to on Monday, the ceremony to present LCHIP grant money to projects, and we got the full amount that we asked for, or that Cell asked for, which was $350,000 was approved. We were one of 26 projects. There were 19 other projects that they just didn't have enough funds for, so that just shows how competitive it was and that we got the full amount, and I'm pretty sure it was the most amount given to any of the projects, so
Yeah,
it's exciting.
that's cool.
Along
That's
the
super
way.
cool that you went too.
Yeah,
Great news.
yeah. That project, though, still isn't gonna, there's still a lot of work to be done, fundraising and, logistics stuff, so I think Dwayne said it's not closing until like the summer officially, so still stuff to be done. That's all I have.
That's great.
Anything else? Anybody else have anything interesting? No?
That's great.
Okay.
Interesting.
Meeting adjourned? Thank you.